Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show here on the WZWA Network. I am one of your hosts with the most here on the West Coast, California in Fury. It is great to be with you once again and great to be with my co-host, Mr. 55 Live, Jack Wallace. Jack, how are you doing this afternoon, my friend?
I'm doing great, and this is going to be a very exciting interview because, as you know, before we went on the air, you said this was going to be a very important step for us, the WZWA Network brand, and the podcast as a whole, as we are starting to sort of step into the direction of becoming more of a wrestling lifestyle channel opposed to a wrestling gaming channel where we just play games and act like idiots and talk to wrestlers, which has all been great fun and all. And we're still going to keep doing that, but it's time to expand.
That's it.
And I think this is a good way to go.
That's it, bro. It's you know, there's a lot of channels that just do the same thing, you know, and you heard it here first on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We are expanding. We're going to be doing many different things. And, you know, wrestling isn't just about the wrestlers. It's about other people connected to the wrestling business, people that do other things in the wrestling business. Even if it's really on the outskirts of being inside the actual business, it's still just as important as what goes on in the actual business. And we're speaking to one of those people here today. This guy is an author. He has helped several guys write books and tell their story in their time in professional wrestling. He's got a podcast. He's a man of many different things, and I'm looking forward to learning about him here today. He is the one and only wrestling historian himself, the one and only Ross Owen Williams. Ross, welcome to the show.
What an introduction. Thank you so much, Carla. That's very much appreciated. And thank you for having me.
No worries, bro. And before I throw it to Jack, I just want to thank you again for being the bridge between us and Hardcore Bob Holly. I had no way of finding out how to contact him. I found out that you wrote the book with him, The Hardcore Truth. I sent you an email and immediately you helped me out. You didn't know me from anyone. And me and Jack really appreciate the fact that you helped us get in touch.
All it takes is some minor flattery, and I'm anybody's, frankly. So you just saying, hey, I like the book. Hey, I do anything for anybody who likes any of the books I've written. So that's all good.
Cool. Thanks, bro. And over to you, Jack, for our first round of questions with Ross Owen Williams.
So as per usual, with every guest we have on the podcast, the first question is always how you became a wrestling fan. What was it in your life that what moment was it the wrestling bug bit you?
It was my dad's fault, and it's something I think he regrets to this day, because back in the UK, when Sky TV started coming in the very late 80s, then we got a Sky Dish, and they had the TV shows on The Simpsons and all of the new stuff. Certainly before that, anybody in the UK would tell you there were 4 channels. That was your lot. Suddenly we were open to another 10, 12 channels. And the kids these days wouldn't comprehend how big of a deal it was to have more than 10 channels where these days, of course, million channels, everything on demand, stick your own stuff on YouTube. But back then, 10 extra channels, real bonus. And there were adverts that would play regularly to advertise a special event coming up soon, broadcast on Sky One or Sky Sports, whatever it was at the time. And it was the WWF from the London Arena or from the Docklands Arena. I can't remember what it was exactly, but there was a special coming up in the UK. And I'd never seen anything like this before. All I knew about wrestling was it was usually fat blokes in singlets hitting each other with their bellies, which was British wrestling. That's Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy. And looking back at it as a historian now, I can see that there were other people like Rollerball Rocco and William Regal, who was working with Steve Regal around that point, who were actually doing the wrestling at that point. But all the British public knew was that this big fat bloke, Big Daddy, would come out, shout, easy, easy, and then hit people with his gut. And that was what they came to see. That was the big boot and the leg drop for Britain. All right. Very sad. It made Hogan look athletic, frankly. But that was what we had at that point. But this advert comes up and it's very glitz, it's glamour, it's colors, it's advertising a match between the Macho Man and Hulk Hogan on British soil. And I'm thinking, wow, I've never seen this before. And my dad says, hey, that looks interesting. Should we watch that? So we watched it together. I absolutely loved it, was completely hooked immediately. And it became almost obsessionate within weeks of having realized I could get this on a weekly basis with WWF Superstars. My dad didn't really like the show so much, and I think forevermore rolled his eyes every time wrestling comes up. And when I told him years later, I'm going to try this in-ring thing, he was like, really, must you? I was like, yeah, it's something I got to do. But he's come around in his dotage as he gets older and older. I think he is a little bit proud of some of the things that I've achieved in that world. But certainly when I was a teenager, it was like, all right, you're watching guys in spandex covered in baby oil. What's wrong with you?
That's it. Yeah. I think it's quite funny when, cause my dad was the same when I said to him, I wanted to be a wrestler and all this stuff. And
yeah,
I like the moment that George Costanza in Seinfeld says, you should have seen the look on my father's face when I said to him, I wanted to be a ventriloquist. It's kind of like the same thing, the disappointment in their eyes that this is the thing that you want to do.
It's not a career that you would look at as one that would be stable. And it was one of those things that when I told Dad I was going to do it, at this point I started training when I was almost 30. In fact, when I just turned 30. So it was very late in the day, but I was under no illusions to the fact that I was going to go to WWE and wrestle in WrestleMania. I knew that wasn't going to be what it was going to be for me, because I'm not an athlete and never have been an athlete, but it was something on my bucket list that I wanted to do, and I did it, and I'm happy with what I did in it. And I think as much as I might have said, well, I could have done this extra, I would have liked to have done that as well. The fact that in just 3 years of doing it, I managed to quite spectacularly tear my ACL and my medial meniscus in my left knee to the point where I still feel that today. And sometimes my knee just dislocates for no reason at the worst of times. Then I think probably I did call it a day at the best time.
Right. I see. In my research,
some people haven't got the frames to be able to deal with that one.
I can understand that. In my research, I didn't actually know that you did wrestle over in the UK.
Yep.
Before we move on, Jack,
Sure.
I actually am interested to learn a little bit about your experience in wrestling, and yeah, just tell us about your fondest memories of all that time period.
Of the beginning bit of when I was a fan in the
when you actually became a wrestler.
Oh, okay. So we're going back to 2009, 2010. The highlight would be working with Bob, and I think that was where I won him over, because before that he thought I could do a decent promo, but I suspect he didn't think I could. He didn't know whether I could keep up in the ring. And whilst athletically I certainly couldn't keep up with him or with the others, with anybody really, the fact is, I think I impressed him with the fact that I was where he needed me to be. I didn't bitch and moan when he worked snug with me, and I thanked him afterwards, despite the fact that he chopped my chest raw. And it was a great experience. I loved working with Bob. I'm not gonna say, hey, I'm a tough guy, because I'm not a tough guy. But I didn't. I took what Bob gave me, and it was fine. I've heard some people whine about working with people who work a little tight or a little snug, and it didn't bother me.
Excellent, bro. Back to you, Jack.
Awesome. So, what were some of your favorite memories of wrestling sort of growing up? I mean, you sort of went over the early days with your dad, but sort of at your peak fandom, what were your sort of your favorite memories when you were watching wrestling?
Early 90s, I liked I think the 90s get a bad deal when you look back, and
yeah.
I think there are a lot of gimmick-led things. Certainly mid 90s, when if you look at Rumble 95, and you've got Mantar, and you've got a bin man, and you've got a hog farmer, and you've got all these people who had second jobs. Yeah. you do start to think, okay, obviously you're not making ends meet in your main job, so we're dealing with the rejects of various industries. But I still did like that. The easily definable characters, and I think that's something that's missing these days.
Yeah.
In that back then, I'll give you a great example. Mike Rotunda, IRS. Okay. Now, was he an exciting in-ring performer? Not especially. He occasionally left his feet, but he was incredibly sturdy. He was obviously incredibly good at what he did. and he knew what he was doing, and he knew that character, and you never saw him break that character. And then you bring it to the modern day, and it's a great link here. You go to his son, and his son is on screen playing this terrifying entity who is completely discombobulated, no idea what's going on. I'm talking about Bray, just making sure you don't think I'm talking about Bo here. Even you could probably, but yeah. But then you've got Bray going on Twitter and showing pictures of his baby, and it's for me. I don't like that. I like that suspension, the willing suspension of disbelief. I think if you're going to play a character for all the time, you've got to be that. You've got to commit to that one. That's where Jericho got it right in 2008, where he said, take away everything from my character that is cheerable. I want to be detestable. I don't want any merchandise sold. It's where The Undertaker throughout his career was like, I'm not even turning up at the Hall of Fame. Things like that, I really like that. And I like that in the early 90s, you had that commitment. For me, I think some of the highest points were, as a fan, most of the things connected to Bret Hart. I was a huge Bret Hart fan. And the realization that because I always expected when you had the big guys in the main event, your Warrior, your Sid, your Hulk Hogan, then that was what I thought was a main event guy when I first came in, because I didn't know it could be anything else. When Flair came across, I thought smaller guy, but fancy robes. I couldn't grasp the thought that Bret would even be the Intercontinental Champion. So when he won that belt off Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam 91, then I was over the moon. And I can still remember coming home from school one day in 92 and turning the show on, and I'd get home so late from school because I was at a boarding school, and I wouldn't get home until like 9 o'clock at night very often. I wasn't boarding there, but in for a day, out for a day. And you get back and turn the TV on. We're half an hour into the wrestling show, so I catch the last half hour, and the commentators are alluding to a new world champion. And I'm thinking, but title changes don't happen unless they're on big events like SummerSlam or WrestleMania. And I'm thinking, so Flair lost the title? Who did he lose the title to? And then moments later, Bret's name is thrown into the conversation. And I'm thinking, but who beat Ric Flair? Because it couldn't have been Bret. And then Bret comes out with a belt over his shoulder. I'm thinking, no. Oh, for DVR at that point, to be able to run it back and just check it. Yeah. Those were the days where you could watch a match and with your heart in your throat and be excited because you didn't know what the result was going to be.
Yes. Now you can see it a mile away. You can see everything coming a mile away. You know that this person's about to win the belt. You know it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because of the proliferation of Dave Meltzer and a million websites and podcasts, yourselves notwithstanding, and me notwithstanding. But I don't know whether it's because the curtain's been pulled back so much now that we watch it with a detached cynicism now that we didn't used to have, or maybe it's just as we get older, we understand the mechanisms and the storytelling a lot more, so we can see what's coming next. But I don't know that. I think it's a combination of all these things, and I don't think you'll ever be able to recapture that feeling of how it was individually for you at an age where you were young enough to really buy into it, old enough to understand that what you were watching wasn't legitimate violence, and two people legitimately trying to hurt each other, but you could still buy into it like your favorite sports teams, in a way that I don't think you can so much right now.
Agreed.
Absolutely, man. Totally in agreement there.
And that's a couple of points I actually wanted to go back to was, so that's something you said earlier. I was actually thinking about this the other day. I find it harder to actually become emotionally attached to a wrestler now because they've got no personality, because they're just another wrestler. Back in the day, everyone had so many different wild gimmicks and characters. And I know in the late 90s that all that stuff got stale and everyone became just another wrestler. But I feel like in this day and age, it might actually be needed to actually wind back the clock a little bit and maybe start bringing in more goofy characters, because I feel like in this day and age, comedy in wrestling is becoming more prevalent than ever with all the stupid stuff, especially stuff AEW is doing. Carl, you would probably agree with how stupid it is, even though I like AEW, but I just feel like wrestling these days just needs a bit more color.
I agree with you. And I think there are some characters or there's some people who really get it. I think just by looking at their performances, very often you can see who really gets it, and the other people who don't get it so much. And I'll give you a couple of examples from what I'm seeing, right? And I don't know whether it's them or whether it's the promotion or whatever it is. Seth Rollins, okay? And I'm probably going to win no fans saying this, but Seth, I still feel like he doesn't know what he is, okay?
Yeah.
In that he naturally comes off as a heel. His character exudes heel. That's just how he comes off. And yet you can't boo him because he's so good at what he does. But then he gets in the ring, does all these flashy, incredible moves, and he's incredible at what he does, but you can't cheer him because he's a dick. And he's kind of like and Bianca Belair hasn't found her place yet, in that you can't boo her because she's phenomenal at what she does in the ring. She's so impressive. I watched Survivor Series the other day, and she actually did something in that match. I can't remember what it was, but she did a couple of moves that I actually said, blimey, wow, out loud to nobody in the room. And I never do that anymore.
I agree. I saw that too.
Yeah, dead impressed with her. And yet she comes out to the ring and she does everything she does until she starts wrestling is a heel. And then she starts wrestling and she's a babyface. So that perplexes me. Seth Rollins, going back to him, a million different nicknames. None of them mean anything. Mm-hmm. They're not connected to anything. They're just stuff. And you go back a couple of years ago at WrestleMania and he comes out dressed as the Night King from Game of Thrones, right? He's got the blue thing going on, the blue contact in, and everything on the graphic is all icy. And yet in the middle of this, his music shouts, "Burn it down." Hang on. Am I missing something? Maybe we're going really ice and fire. I don't know. But there's too much of, I'm going to do this because it's cool, rather than I'm going to do this because it makes sense. Rhea Ripley is another good example. Up to about a year ago, I was convinced Rhea was going to be the best women's wrestler of all time. I was so on board with this. Just because I saw a match with her in NXT. She worked with Casey Catanzaro, and everything Rhea did was so on point, to the point where she did a simple suplex and then she covered Casey in such a way that you could just see she was looking at the camera, counting along, because she expected her suplex to get 3. And for me, what a heel character that is. That, well, of course she's not going to kick out. Whereas people just usually cover, the other person kicks out, and then they get on with the rest of the match. It's part of a sequence. Yeah. And to me, that's not telling the story. If you're going to go for a cover, you should only go for a cover if you are convinced you've done enough to put that person away. Or you're trying to squeak one out. But you don't go for a cover after a suplex expecting the other person to kick out. That doesn't make any logical sense. But I thought she was brilliant in that regard. But then she comes up and she works in the main roster, and suddenly she's wearing white and light blue, and she's putting contacts in, which don't make it. It's just stuff for the sake of stuff. Yeah. And it's not knocking Rhea, because she's a phenomenal athlete, and I think she could still be brilliant. But I just felt like she was there, and then she's just taken a step backwards. But I'll flip it and talk positively rather than just burying people, because I don't like to bury. I'm not trying to bury people. I'm just observing as a fan here. Yeah. The person who has impressed me the most over this last year, and I am, if I was going to put Wrestler of the Year, if it was all up to me, and I would got to say Wrestler of the Year, and I'd be curious to know what you guys would say on this one. For 2020, who would you say is Wrestler of the Year?
Randy Orton.
Oh,
okay,
man.
I think Orton's doing a really good job. That's all.
Orton's amazing. He's a guy who gets what he is.
Like, I'm just thinking, like, man, at this stage of the game, and now he's actually getting better than he. I just think he's doing a really good job.
Yeah, he's so good. What about you, Jack?
Orton has. I never liked Orton growing up. I didn't like Orton as a teenager. But the fact that I now like Orton now says a lot about him and his work. Because I used to think he was slow and boring and all that sort of stuff. Whereas these days, he still wrestles much the same, but for some reason, it's just so much more exciting. I'm not sure why. So Orton would be one of them, but I'd also say Drew McIntyre, but I feel like he's had a bit of a weaker second half of the year. His first half was red hot, and if I was going to base off just the first half, I'm going to say hands down Drew. But Drew's lost me a little bit over the last couple of months. So
and he as good as the material written for you, I think, sometimes.
Exactly right, man.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes you've got to take shit and turn it into shinola, as Al often tells me. So, Drew, I'm with you. Drew had a fantastic start to the year, and I love that Drew's come into his own in just doing little things like those interactions with the camera, where he'll give the camera a wink, and you feel, he's a big dude, but I can still relate to him as a guy. Even though he looks like an underwear model, then you look at him and you just think that's a dude I'd have a beer with. And I think he's got that salt of the earth. I like this guy. I want to cheer this guy. There's none of this. Like when Shawn Michaels was a babyface, it was so hard to cheer him when he was in his 30s because you just thought, what a dick. And even when he was trying to be likable, then it was so hard for him to do that. Drew seems completely the opposite in that he just doesn't seem to be able to be dislikable right now. And he's doing so well. I'm really impressed with him. And he would be probably my pick for the male of the year. But the best wrestler of the year is Bayley.
Interesting.
And she has been a revelation to me this year. Everything I've never had in 30 odd years of being a wrestling fan. It's never been that my favorite wrestler is a woman. And I realized this the other day when I was watching Survivor Series and she came out, and I found myself just watching her coming out and thinking, oh my God, my favorite wrestler is Bayley. And I loved her in NXT with that gimmick with all the little girls wanting to emulate her, etc., the ponytail gimmick. But everything that she's done this year is so precise. Everything she's done this year is so in character. Her in-ring work, you cannot knock. She is where she needs to be at all times. Her reactions are spot on. She has transformed herself so completely from what she was into what she is. Everything's so believable and credible and consistent that you can explain her and you can understand her and her motivations so quickly. And what first took me was at WrestleMania, where they had a silent arena and the commentators are talking like she said something along the lines of she nearly got her. And as Bayley was rolling out the ring, Bayley shouted, "No, they didn't." And I just thought that was so incredible that she got it. She just gets it. So I've been so impressed with her taking what could have been a dead end character when they transformed her. It could have been the death knell. You look at, what's her name? Emma, Tennille Dashwood.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they gave her this new character that she just couldn't handle.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because it didn't seem to me a complicated character, but she wasn't comfortable in it. So I think it's a case of, when you go back to the 90s, I'll give you an example of Shane Douglas and happy playing the franchise in ECW, bring him to WWE, stick him in the Dean Douglas gimmick, and he tanked, absolutely tanked. And I don't know why, because that gimmick, to me, wasn't a hard gimmick to pull off. But I think
maybe if your heart's not in something, it's going to be...
That's it.
Yeah.
But you've got to throw your heart into it. And as Bob told you, then he threw his heart into the Sparky Plug character and he gave it his best shot until somebody said, hang on, this guy's trying his best here. Let's try something else. But if what you're going to do is go in and half-ass something because you don't really go for it, why would they give you anything else? They want to invest in the people that are going to try and do the best with what they got. Prime example being Glenn Jacobs, who threw his all into Isaac Yankem, crappy gimmick though it was, and then threw his all into the fake Diesel gimmick. And look at this, fake Diesel, fake Razor. Fake Diesel got over. Fake Diesel was actually getting over and fake Razor wasn't. You look at the Rumble in 97, Bogner comes out, booed out of the arena, thrown out in seconds. Jacobs comes out and people are like, okay, we can buy this guy. He's not Diesel, but we can buy this guy. Ends up in the final three.
No, some great insight there, Ross. Thank you for that.
That was awesome.
I'm sorry, I'm just going off on a massive tangent here.
That's fine. No, trust me.
I should point out, you did start off by saying good afternoon, but for me, it's morning, so I'm caffeinated and ready to go.
Well, like Jack, I can already see right now we should definitely get Ross on more shows in the future to talk more about wrestling because I really enjoy the insight. So
definitely, that was great.
I'm sorry for rambling so much.
That's fine, bro. We want to get back on track here, though, with our line of questioning about you delving into being an author and helping some of these professional wrestlers get their stories of their life and the business out there. So how did you first gain an interest in writing, and when did you realize that you were good at it?
Okay, so I still haven't realized I'm good at it. I put words one after the other, and people seem to like them. I wrote from a fairly young age, and as I guess as I went through my drama degree, then I found that I started tweaking the text more and more, but this would sound better like this, and this would be better like this. And towards the end of my degree, I decided, in my infinite wisdom, that for one of my final projects, rather than translating a foreign language scene into an English scene, because we were meant to translate something, I thought I'd translate an entire film out of the 60s into the 90s. So I translated era to era. So I rewrote My Fair Lady for the modern era. And that was pretty good fun. And I thought I enjoyed doing that. I'm quite good on paper. So it just kind of snowballed from there. And I wrote a couple of other screenplays, just toying with them in my 20s. And while I was running a business at that point, then it was a kind of on the side hobby. And running my own business, then rather than outsourcing all of the writing and all of the marketing material, I thought I'd do it myself, and it worked pretty well. And one thing led to another, and eventually what happened is when I sold that business, was engaged to remain on as a consultant and a PR person for the company that bought my company, and write their press releases, write their entry forms. And it was then I realized that while I'm not going to say I'm the best writer in the world, I'm a lot better than many. And a lot of people don't string words together so well on paper. So a chap like me with above average capability is above average, as they say. So we'll take that. And it just, after the wrestling thing, and after Bob, then it got to a point where he and I got talking after we had our match, and he realized that I could put words together, and bang, there you go, hardcore truth.
All right. So the next question I want to ask is, are you a ghostwriter? And to those out there who don't exactly know what that entails, please enlighten them.
Okay, I'm not a ghostwriter.
You're not, okay.
No, because my name's on all the books.
Okay, so if it wasn't on the book, that means, okay.
Yeah, ghostwriter is if you are, I'm a co-author. Yeah.
Okay.
A ghostwriter would be if, like Brett's book, right?
Okay.
I don't believe Brett wrote it himself. I believe Brett had help in writing it, but I don't believe Brett put a credit for anybody else on his book. Jericho, he's got, I think it's Keith Elliott Greenberg. Is it? I don't know. I don't think it is. I forget who Jericho's, it'll come to me in a minute, but Jericho has the name on all of the books. Foley wrote his own completely.
Yeah.
Yep. So Foley, but Brett there, ghostwriter, I believe, behind the scenes. Co-author, person who writes with the person. However, I think the key thing when you are writing an autobiography with somebody is you've got to write their voice, and the reader can't read your voice. And that's been quite an interesting challenge for me, given that now you're listening to my voice. You probably can't hear too much Bob Holly. And you probably can't hear too much Al Snow, and you definitely can't hear any Hornswoggle because I haven't sworn once yet.
Good point.
Over to you, Jack.
Sure. So as a writer, when you are doing someone's autobiography, what are the first steps in the planning process before the first interview?
Rapport. It's all about rapport, setting expectations in advance as to what you're going to do, and making sure you're aligned on the story that you want to tell. And for the three guys that I've worked with so far in wrestling books, they've all been really clear with me, and I've been really clear with them, that we're going to pull no punches, that at the end of the day, we get it all out on paper, and then anything we want to take out, we can take out at the end. But they've been so giving of their time and so giving of honesty, and that's reflected in the final book. But no secrets from each other on these. I've asked them some very hard questions. They've given me some very hard answers. And there have been things that we've gone back and said, let's maybe keep that one to one side, because that doesn't help the story, or that maybe buries somebody that we don't feel comfortable doing, whatever it might be. But I'll flip it around and tell you about a book I've mentioned in other interviews that I was going to write at one point, and that was Vader's autobiography. And I talked with Leon. Yeah, I talked with Leon for an extended period of time. And in the end, he did do a book with Kenny Casanova. Kenny's a great guy, and he did a great job with the book. But I'm kind of glad that one fell apart when I was talking with Leon, because Leon couldn't, and I don't know if it changed later, but at the time when I got talking to Leon, he couldn't separate the myth of Vader, world champion over 3 different continents, with the guy Leon White playing the role of Vader. And it was like he was trying to work me. He was trying to make me believe he was a legitimate world champion, and he legitimately beat Nobuhiko Takada in a shoot fight. It's like, dude, I know that the UWFI was a work. All right, I get it. I know it's kind of shoot at points, but it's still a work at the end of the day. So we're not going to get very far if you're going to try and sell me, the writer, with lies. We got to have transparency. So that was a project where I was quite relieved when it all fell apart, and it was quite frustrating trying to get that through to acceptance stage. We got a long way. We had an offer from WWE to publish it through them.
Wow.
And in the end, WWE and ECW Press and I all kind of just said, this isn't going to work. It's been so long, and there are so many extra demands, and then last minute, this is changing, that's changing, the other's changing. So when I heard that Leon was doing all those indie appearances a few years ago and changing things on Will Ospreay last minute, and Zack Sabre, I think, was it Will or was, I don't know if it was Will Ospreay or Zack Sabre. I think it was Will. Yeah. I wasn't surprised to hear last minute alterations in plans, which is a real shame, because I've always been you give your word and your word you bond. And that's how I work with Al and Dylan and Bob. You know, you take their handshakes gold, their words gold, you take them to the bank. And I think that's the rapport you build at the beginning. Then everything flows from there. And once you've got that understanding of what you both want to achieve out of the process, the rest just falls into place. I think it helped also with all 3 of them that I had wrestled, because firstly, they knew as a fan myself that they weren't going to have to go back and explain things to me like you would with an author who doesn't know wrestling. So they don't have to explain what a pay-per-view is called, or they don't have to explain what a move does. So I'm going to just know that naturally. And I'm going to remind them of things that they might have forgotten about their own career because I've watched them. But also the fact that I've stepped between the ropes, I've taken some bumps, I've jumped off the ropes, and I've injured myself in the line of fire. Then I think that they've all respected the fact that I'm not just a guy who has watched. I'm a guy who actually got in the ring and took a few lumps. And I think there's a sliver of respect on that. Just a sliver, we'll say.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably less from Bob, because Bob wrestled me, so he knows how bad I suck.
Oh, man. So again, speaking of Bob, tell us a little bit more about your experience working with Bob on the book. Talk to us about some of the days you spent with Bob. Actually, did you ever go on out into the wild with him? Because I know that he talks a lot about that. Did you ever have one of those days with him?
I would not go in the wild with Bob if you paid me $1 million, because I would come back without my skin. Bob is, contrary to what some have reported, some keyboard warriors have reported, Bob is an absolute peach. He's a delight. He's a lovely guy. He's so thoughtful, so considerate, so respectful, and so genuine. And you know where you stand with him. And I think that's what some people can't cope with. But he's hardcore. He's straight down the line. And no, I've avoided going on safari with him. Being in the ring with him was enough. But he's a hell of a trainer, as a wrestling trainer, hell of a trainer, knows what he's doing. And working on the book with him was great fun. Just a really great chapter in my life was all the interviews we were doing.
Yeah, awesome. He's great. And, when I see a lot of people criticize him, I just think, these people don't know him. They've never spoken to him.
They don't know shit. They just watched a few episodes of Tough Enough and came to some conclusions.
Well, that's it. And people just leap to that. You want to see the funny side of Bob. I did a short film with him a number of years ago, right? And if you go and check this out on YouTube, it's called Thanks for Reading. If you check out my YouTube channel, Ross Owen Williams, and you check out Thanks for Reading, and it's a short film that Bob and I shot, and the camera. We had a bit of an issue with the person doing the camera not managing to wipe the lens before he started filming, which was great. So Bob and I did. I scripted it, and then Bob did a lot of improv on the day, and you wouldn't believe how funny Bob actually is until you see this. So go check it out.
Excellent. I'm going to watch that straight after this.
From Bob to Al Snow with his book, Self-Help, Life Lessons from the Bizarre Wrestling Career of Al Snow. Al's a very intelligent man, as we found.
Yes.
I thought I knew a lot about wrestling, and then I fucking spoke to Al Snow, and he made me feel like it's like my first day being
a novice. Yeah.
Al is a dictionary. He's a thesaurus. He's an encyclopedia.
Working with him must have been quite the experience. So how was that whole process with Al? How much did you learn from Al, and how was that whole experience?
So I wish I had had a chance to talk with Al before I did wrestling. And looking back at what I did, even now, 10 years later on, I can look back at moments that I had in the ring or things that I did in front of an audience that now I would do completely differently, just simply because of the conversations I had with Al. He understands this at such a level of depth that it's no wonder that he has become the success that he has after his in-ring career has wound down. And in talking to Al, it's quite funny because he learnt these as he was going, and it's quite funny because he was blinkered by that want to have a good match and be a great performer and keep the audience on the edge of their seats, and that ultimately cost him, I think, and I think he knows this, that during his career, there were times when he should have just made himself a star rather than having a good match. But Al was about having a good match. But now the situation is in with owning OVW and doing such a great job with that to keep bringing that up. And the production values of what he's doing is so superb. And the episodic TV, absolutely brilliant. And as a trainer, par excellence, second to none. He's absolutely outstanding.
Oh, he is so valuable to the wrestling business. I truly believe he is the backbone of professional wrestling. And
a great guy as well. It's just, again, I can't stress this enough. Such a good guy, genuine, considerate. And the funny thing is that there'll be people that I know in my local area that I would count as friends, and I won't get a happy birthday from them, but I'll get a happy birthday from Bob Holly. I'll get a Merry Christmas text from Al Snow. I get just out of nowhere. It's not, they don't need anything or want anything from me. They just occasionally reach out, and they're both very lucky men because they've got fantastic wives who pretty much man the shop to make sure that the communication stays open. So Linda and Jess are just superb. And I think they both know how lucky they are on that front.
Yeah. Over to you, Carl.
Cool, man. I must say Linda was extremely helpful in our negotiations and getting the interview sorted out. So big shout out to Linda.
And very helpful at reminding Bob what films he likes. From what
yeah, that was good.
And his favorite alcoholic beverage.
Yes.
So over to Swoggle, the one and only Hornswoggle. Life is short and so am I. The wrestling journey of Dylan Swoggle Postal. I guess that's how you pronounce the surname.
Postal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how you went from Bob to Al. I assume it was Bob first, Al second, Swoggle third.
Correct, yes.
I'm assuming maybe you got into contact with Al because of Bob.
Yes.
Yep. So Swoggle is not really a connection that you would consider with Al or Bob. So how did you come into contact with our foul-mouthed favorite?
Lilliputian. It was like an RKO. It came out of nowhere. It wasn't anything I expected to work on. what happened is Ian Douglas was working on a book with Dylan, and they'd got a first draft together, and it was very good. Excuse me. It was very good, and it was firing on about 4 out of 5 cylinders, or 6 out of 8, however many cylinders you want to say it was firing on. It just needed a little something extra. And it was ECW Press, and they got in touch with me and said, hey, could you have a look at this? And I took what Ian had done, which was pretty much mostly there, and I applied a couple of different questioning techniques and adjusted a few things. And I re-interviewed Dylan, not to take away from what Ian had done, but to deepen certain things.
Right. Yep.
And it was, I think, because of the challenges that Dylan went through as a young lad dealing with achondroplasia, like he has, and all those challenges, there was a greater depth needed. And I'm not saying that Ian couldn't or didn't do that, but it was a more complex book, dare I say, than Al's or Bob's, which were different retellings. I mean, Bob's is a straight retelling of his career, of what he did and what he saw. Al's is, at points, as you've seen, an advisory book in life lessons along the way, and a lot of road stories. But Dylan has been through a physical journey and an emotional journey as a young dad as well, that I think very few can relate to. So certainly the little person angle is something that benefited, I think, from a second interviewer to add depth, because Ian asked questions that I wouldn't have thought of. I asked questions that Ian wouldn't have thought of. So it all came together, and I think it was stronger for what we did together. It wouldn't have been, without Ian being involved, it wouldn't have been the same book. Without me being involved, it wouldn't have been the same book. And without Dylan involved, Ian and I would have just had a shit book, frankly. So, there you go.
Exactly. Oh, that is very interesting. And it kind of makes me think to, sometimes I watch an interview and I wish that this guy asked a different question.
Yeah.
Or delved into something a little deeper, and I get so frustrated because I'm like, man, I wish I had the chance to be in the interviewer's seat for that interview, because I know I would have got more out of, let's say, a Vince Russo when talking about this specific guy, and they would have just brushed past the topic because the host wasn't asking the correct line of questioning.
That's it. You're always going to get that, though.
Spicy little bit of information that might have just popped in Vince's head if you got to that line of questioning.
I know, it's so frustrating. I get this even when I'm listening to Conrad and Bruce.
100%. 100%. I get so mad at Conrad all the time.
I love Conrad.
When he first started,
he's so good.
He was great, but sometimes later on, I'm like, God, you're skimming through it a little bit, bro. I'll need that little bit more of information.
I think the thing is, because they try and deal with, they got a 3-hour episode, but they deal with an entire career in that time, or an entire, whatever it might be they do in that time, that you're going to miss certain things. But you do get those moments where it's like, dude, there's this, it's right there. Ask the question. Oh, no.
Oh, God.
And we're back to impressions of Dusty Rhodes. All right. which are very good.
They're fantastic. Yeah. Although I think I'd prefer the Jim Cornette impressions most. God damn, motherfucker.
Yeah. Double cheese, double onion.
So the next question I had was, how have ECW Press been to work with? That's something that I'm interested in learning a little bit about. They seem to be quite big on
they
the
are
autobiographies.
Yeah, they are so good at what they do. The team there are so, you can't fault them. Everybody there. Michael Holmes is the point man, if you will, on all wrestling books there, and he's a great guy. I had a chance to have a beer with him a few years ago when he was over in England at a golf course for some reason. It just happened to be about 5 miles up the road from where I was living at the point, so we just hung out and had a couple of beers together. But he knows his stuff. He's also a fan, so he can talk wrestling with you, and he knows enough about the industry, knows plenty about the industry. So it's not like he's just looking at it from the publishing point of view, but everybody else there is brilliant, from the design to the layout to the editing. You know, Jen Albert's fantastic. Eamon's brilliant. David Caron behind the scenes. Everybody there has been so easy to work with and so inclusive, to the point that I have been afforded inclusion into the edit on all books, and in fact to the point where I pretty much have had final sign off on so many things. It's very rare that they say we're going to override you on this thing because we don't think that needs to go in. So for me, the process has been write, rewrite, edit, re-edit, and it goes round and round. But I've also had serious say in the cover art, which I think is something that you don't often get, especially with companies who are looking to do this about a sportsman. Bob's book, they gave me a few examples, we went with it. Al's book, then that kind of caged look. I can't remember where that came. I'm confident I had something to do with that, quite a major thing to do with that one. The idea of Dylan in the ring with him under the ring, that was my idea. And I was really pleased that we went with that one in the end. But the fact that we and ECW not only allowed but encouraged us to be involved in every single aspect of the process was brilliant. And I cannot thank them enough for how accommodating and professional they've been throughout.
Absolutely, bro. I just thought it was important to mention ECW Press.
100%.
They are quite prevalent in the wrestling autobiography industry. Over to you, Jack.
Sure. What have you learned most through helping writing these books?
Wow, never been asked that question before. What have I learned the most? Oh,
Got you thinking.
you did get me thinking. Can I come back to you on that one? Can
Sure,
I come back in maybe a couple of questions? I'll get the hamster running in the wheel, and we'll see what comes back off that one in a minute. Otherwise, there'll just be a lot of silence.
This one may help a little bit. Is there anybody else you would like to work on a book with? Anyone in particular that might be a good idea?
Yeah, whether or not I'd actually ever get them, I think the obvious ones are obvious. You know, if Randy knocks on my door and says, "Hey, Ross, do you want to?" Yeah, Randy, I'll give it a go. You know, but putting aside the people, you know, putting aside the Triple H's, the John Cena's, the Undertakers, and putting aside those guys, then I think Sheamus has got a very good story to tell.
I think so.
I'd love to work with Christian.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think Jay's got an incredible story.
Yes.
And I've tried to reach out to him a couple times and no dice yet. So fingers crossed at some point. Kofi, when the time comes. We're not there yet, but I've talked with Kofi, and hopefully that will one day come to pass. I would say Nick Aldis.
Yeah.
Because I think Nick is carving out a career. We're a long way away from this, but Nick, I would presume Nick will write his own in time, because Nick's a very clever chap, and he's written a book already, a bodybuilding book and a health and fitness book. And yeah, Nick's a guy I worked with as well, actually, during my brief run. And I had a particularly harsh wedgie from him in a battle royal at one point. So yeah, but Nick's a fantastic guy, and I can't understand why WWE haven't had him yet.
Makes no sense to me, but I think he's doing quite all right now.
He's definitely doing okay.
Like, he looks.
You know who I think would be great? Steve Blackman. Steve Blackman.
Blackman, no, I would be terrified to work with Blackman, because if I put a semicolon in the wrong place, that'd be the last you'd hear of me.
Could be a fair point. I think Steve Blackman's writing a book would probably be one of the most incredible things I'd ever read.
He had malaria all those years, and he was in the WWE in the early 90s when he was jacked, and then he came back, and now he's like, a bounty hunter and all that.
This is crazy, man.
So the thing is, stories. When it comes to a book, Steve Blackman doesn't read books. He just stares them down until they give him the information he wants.
that people think they know, like, you know, they all want to make those jokes about Chuck Norris, but they haven't missed. It's just because they don't know Steve Blackman.
Exactly. Chuck Norris checks his under his bed for Steve Blackman.
Exactly.
That's about how it goes.
Are we able to get back to that question about what you've learned most, or is it still just?
Yeah, no, I think I've learnt that sometimes you just got to put yourself out there. And that what these guys did and how these guys succeeded was by just saying, screw it, here we go, let's go. And the respect that each of them has gained in the industry has come from turning up reliably and doing what is asked of them. And you couldn't call any of the three main eventers, but you could certainly say they've each carved their niche in wrestling history. As far as I'm concerned, all three of them are Hall of Famers. Yeah, for all different reasons. You know, you cannot argue. You can't argue Al Snow. You can't argue Bob Holly. And some might try and argue Dylan, but I ask you, has there ever been a bigger little person in wrestling? Certainly in modern wrestling.
Never.
Exactly. And
he's still doing it now with his ACW promotion, running a promotion in Wisconsin. You know, he's still contributing to the wrestling industry. You know, and okay, give you the example of him turning up recently on AEW in diapers, right? he gets it. He understands it's just some silly shit on TV sometimes. And you turn up and you don't take yourself too seriously and you do what you're asked to do and you cash your check and you go home, you know? And for me, realizing that all the life lessons I've learned from, especially from Bob and from Al, but even learning life lessons from Dylan and fighting against the adversity that he's fought against his entire life. And then just saying, I'm going to do this. This is no plan B. I'm just going to do this. And so I've applied that a lot more to my writing. And certainly that's when my film stuff started to come together, and it's coming together more and more now. And my radio stuff that I'm doing is just, right, let's do this. And either people will accept me or they will reject me. But if I don't try, then I can guarantee there will be no acceptance because there's nothing to accept. So if you don't play the game, you ain't getting anywhere.
Yeah, that's it, man. Just gotta sort of get it all out there, and sort of, you know, no one's gonna come finding you. You gotta put yourself out there, get the word out yourself.
That's it, and it's a lesson I wish I had learned or been prepared to take. I guess I knew it at the back of my mind, but in my 20s, then who knows what would have been different. But it was a different world because YouTube wasn't a thing back then. So it was a lot harder to get noticed when YouTube wasn't a thing. Everything kind of changed overnight. And I was just at that cusp where I was getting to the age where I felt like I was credible to be noticed in my late 20s. Then YouTube came along and allowed 16-year-olds to get noticed. It was like, dude, where were you 5 years ago?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had YouTube growing up, man. So I've sort of always been on there, trying to figure out ways you can get yourself out there.
It's so different, and it's you look back and you think about what your parents must have thought about certain things that you took for granted as a kid, and no doubt one day when you've got teenage kids of your own, then they'll do things like my teenage daughter does right now, and I'll look at it and I'll say things to her about, you know, how much time she spends on her phone and this, that, the other, and then I'll hear my dad's voice talking back to me. And I realized that I've suddenly become him, which no bad thing because I love my dad and he's great. So, you know, that's no bad thing. I'll take that. Yeah.
It's funny.
Only he doesn't like wrestling.
Like my dad used to always try to ramble on about me, always spending too much time on my phone. But now, since he's gotten social media, I'll just go downstairs and all I see is just laying down.
Oh, yep.
So it's funny the way life works.
Sure is.
Last thing, tell us about your A to Z wrestling podcast. How did that come about? And tell us about it, man.
I did an interview about a year and a bit ago with a guy called Ryan Acra at Believe. Great guy, really good guy. We had a great chat. And at the end of that, he said to the owners of the network, hey, this guy knows his stuff. You should get him on. He should be a host. So I got chatting with the guys there, and a chap called Carlton was the guy I dealt with initially. I think he's moved on since. And we started off, the idea that I had was to select a different subject each week with the idea that then those podcasts would be evergreen. Because rather than doing something which was time sensitive, e.g., let's talk about WrestleMania last week, and then a month later, it's not so relevant anymore. If we can talk about the best big guys in wrestling history, or the people who should have won Royal Rumbles, or the people who were never a world champion, these are things where, yeah, people will be added to those conversations in time, but those are not particularly time sensitive. So they could be just as viable or just as good in a year as they are right now. And so that was where that idea came from. And then the A to Z was a nice function. A to Z, I'm sounding American now. The A to Z was a very good function, a good framework for that. And right now I've had to take a hiatus on that one because of coronavirus has led to a few complications. Not the least of which is that with my 3-year-old son having been off nursery for the last, or for much of this year, then all of my time has had to go into looking after him because my good lady works full time. So I've been full-time dad this year, and that's one of the casualties. So in the new year, we'll see what happens, and maybe we can pick that one up again.
Excellent, bro. So I just want to ask before we get to 5 Second Frenzy, if you have anything else in the pipeline, or if there's anything you would like to plug, Ross Owen Williams, let us know.
Okay. I would certainly like to plug the books, and we've talked about them at length already, but anybody who hasn't read Bob Holly's The Hardcore Truth, Al Snow's Self-Help, or Dylan Postel's Life is Short and So Am I, please do check them out. I think you'll find them straightforward, engaging reads that hopefully capture the voice of the people in question, the subject in question. I think they've each got their own merits, and they do draw the curtain back on the industry. So I think there's much to enjoy if you're a wrestling fan. And I think also much to enjoy if you're not a wrestling fan, because I've given these books to non-wrestling fans and they've enjoyed them as well. Especially Al's, because there are so many funny stories in that one. So I'd love to plug those. Also, the feature film Winter Ridge, which I believe is available on Amazon Prime, or at least at the time of recording it was, and you can find this anywhere you do online. Winter Ridge, a film that I wrote. Didn't come out quite the way I expected when I wrote it, because a few liberties were taken with the script between me signing off on it and then making it. So I'll put my hand on my heart and say I think what I wrote was better than what ended up on the screen. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a writer who doesn't believe that. But Dom, the director, did a good job in getting that through to the finished product. And right now I'm working on a couple of other films, which I won't say too much about, but there's a mixed martial arts film that is at quite an early stage of development, and a war film based around the Waterloo conflict in Europe, the Napoleonic Wars. And that's something that I've got a big meeting for tomorrow. So fingers crossed, watch this space.
Awesome, excellent, bro.
Sounds
So
exciting.
It is time for 5 Second Frenzy. Ross Owen Williams. I'm sure you're aware of the segment now. If you watch,
yeah, you do realize that me talking for 5 seconds on anything is a virtual impossibility.
Well, we've noticed that with wrestlers too. It takes longer to remember.
I haven't gone on as long as Al, have I?
No.
Nah.
All right.
So 5 Second Frenzy. Ross Owen Williams, your favorite wrestler of all time.
Bret Hart.
Nice.
I'm changing things a little bit here because you're also an author. So who is your favorite author?
Dennis Wheatley.
Your favorite book you've ever read?
Strange Conflict by Dennis Wheatley. Although I'd say I continually reread The Running Man by Stephen King. I just finished reading it for the 3rd time this year, yesterday. I don't know why. It's a very fast read. It's not like the film was at all. And there's more artistry to Stephen King's writing than people give him credit for. The older I get, the more I get into writing, the more I realize this guy's good. He's so good.
Absolutely. He is who he is for a reason.
Absolutely.
The favorite wrestling match of all time that you've seen?
Bret Hart versus Steve Austin, WrestleMania 13.
Brilliant. Great decision there. Your favorite TV show?
Oh, wow. Okay. This will change quite regularly. I've been enjoying the Great British Bake Off recently. You won't get that answer very often. I've been enjoying that one a bit.
Never had that.
I've Game of Thrones. I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones. Scrubs, love Scrubs, and British comedy back from the 80s, Blackadder.
Lovely,
Nice.
lovely. Favorite film?
Life is Beautiful.
Favorite musical artist?
Okay, are we going old school or current day?
Let's go a bit of both.
Okay, so if you want to go back in time, I've got a great deal of love for Seal. Love Seal.
Excellent.
Tori Amos, Enya, Beverly Craven, Sarah McLachlan. So a bit of a mixed bag there. And currently, I don't know why and how this has happened, but I really like Dua Lipa.
Interesting. That's
I know.
interesting.
I didn't see that happening, but I just really like Dua Lipa right now.
That is a very interesting answer.
That's you're disapproving, aren't you, Jack?
That was just, I just wasn't expecting it. Like
Interesting means shit. Is that right?
We always get the same answers for favorite musical artists, man. But that was just an interesting answer I wasn't expecting.
I'll go anywhere. You know, there's sometimes I'll listen to Metallica 1 minute, Metallica, Rammstein, Avenged Sevenfold, and then next minute I'll listen to Mozart. So you can't tell what's going on.
I feel you.
Got to mix up variety, spice of life. Favorite. Oh, speaking of spice, curry. I'll take curry.
Yep. A lot of Englishmen like a bit of curry.
They do.
Favorite place to eat?
Are we allowed to eat anywhere but our homes right now?
I mean, we are.
You are. We're not.
We can do what we want.
Round the back of a Nando's by the bin. I don't know. No. Favorite place to eat? There's a fantastic Italian restaurant near where I live, which I haven't been to for so long now that I've probably forgotten the name of it. But it's my local Italian, and I love it.
Lovely. Your favorite alcoholic beverage?
I would say that would be either Abbott Ale or red wine, Merlot in particular.
Yes, nice.
Very nice. Very nice.
I wrote much of Bob's book with the help of Merlot.
Favorite female body part?
Right. I came prepared for this. Ready to objectify women. No. Eyes.
We get eyes a lot. We do get eyes a lot. And finally, Ross Owen Williams, your favorite curse word?
Now, this is difficult because I have a toddler. And because I have a toddler, I am not allowed swear words right now. And some of them tend to slip out when I'm not expecting it. And the other day, I managed to squeeze an F and a C into my conversation in the car when I was observing that another driver was perhaps not as observant on the road as I was. Then I realized that I was not observant at all because my boy was in the back seat. So that was bad news. But what really brought it home to me that I can't be swearing is even the lesser known swear word that I'm sure you guys have quite regularly is bloody. In America, not so much, but bloody this, bloody that, fantastic. Okay, I'm all for that. Great. And I realized I was saying it more than I thought when I was walking with my son through a field one day. I had him on my shoulders, and for whatever reason, I started singing a Frank Sinatra song. I don't know why, but I was singing I've Got You Under My Skin. And Rex, my boy, said, Daddy, don't sing. Daddy, don't sing. And I carried on singing, and I was laughing. Daddy, stop singing that bloody song. This was before he was 3. So when your 2-year-old tells you to stop singing that bloody song, then you start thinking, well, maybe I've taught him the wrong language, but I'm definitely doing the right thing by winding him up with my musical choices. That's what dads do, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they get on social media a lot, Jack. Isn't that right?
Exactly. I mean, I don't know if I'd want my dad's music taste personally. I mean, some of it's all right, but yeah, I'm happy with mine, over his.
Yep.
Growing up,
you wait till well, that's it. You wait till when you got kids in many years' time, and they'll look at your music taste, and you'll just think you listen to shit, son.
Oh yeah. Well, man, I wonder what music will be like in 20 years. It's already pretty fucked up now.
Yeah, well, you think about this. You think of the songs that are being released these days, and as a radio presenter, I think about this quite a lot. Then you hear so many songs these days, and I think this song is not even going to be remembered in 6 months. And you go back to some of the songs from the 80s that still sound good even now.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering which artists that are relevant today will have the level of longevity of some of those acts, you know, the Queens and the Duran Durans, Spandau Ballets, who still get play these days. And you can strike up gold and everybody knows what it is, even now. Whereas I don't see too many acts right now having that level of longevity. But I think that's just the era that we live in, that everything's much more disposable. But that's a theological discussion for another time, and definitely not on a wrestling podcast.
That's a interesting take, but I feel like we're just never going to know the answer for, let's say, 30 years.
Let's come back. Let's book a date. 30 years time, you and me, we'll get together and we'll discuss
2050.
2050.
We'll see how right we were. Yeah. Yeah. If I'm still here, consider it a done.
We'll do it. 2050.
Excellent. Well, Ross Owen Williams, thank you again so much for your time this morning, your time this afternoon, our time. It has been really interesting learning a bit about the life behind being a co-author and also talking to another wrestling historian such as yourself. So we've really appreciated it, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great fun. I love what you guys do. So please do keep doing it. It's so important that folks like you can bring great interviews like you do with the other guys, and then crap like you do with me here. That's my fault, not yours. So, but thanks so much for giving me a chance to spout. No, really good fun.
Thanks, bro. And everyone out there, thank you for watching the show here on the WZWA Network. I am your co-host, Karlifornia Free, alongside Jack Wallace and Ross Owen Williams, and we will see you next time. Thank you.